For the past many weeks and many months, it feels like we are doing a lot of holy things for Israel, for peace, for the world. It feels like we're doing a lot of unity. We're adding a lot of tzedakah. We're adding a lot of mitzvot. But sometimes it's hard not to get discouraged. Has anyone at all felt that? Or is everyone else feeling uplifted a lot, right? It's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard. We're kind of coming to a place where it's like, Hashem, is there a law of diminishing returns happening here? Like, you've woken us up. We're being together with you. We're doing what we need to do. Genug, make the effort succeed. What's going on? Some people say, oh, well, Hashem will just take us out of this Egypt, right? He'll just take us out of exile. It's up to him. Like, he just have to send Mashiach. He just has to begin the era of Geula, and that's it. There's nothing I can do about it. So I thought we would take time as the women of Bais Chana to strengthen ourselves in this area again, the area of what I do. Does it really matter? What is it really doing? Which is so important, because being on the threshold of a world that's changing, a world that evil's on the way out, let's come back and really focus on what does it mean to have feminine faith? What does faith mean at all? I remember that a few days ago, we were having this Zoom call, and one of our friends here brought out a tambourine that she had created. And she said, oh, look, I created this tambourine because when we read about the feminine faith, the faith of Miriam and the women who came out of Egypt, they had these tambourines when they were coming out of Egypt. So what's the story with the tambourines? The people of Israel had received a prophecy. They'd be a great nation and they'd leave in great wealth. So the women, they prepared for it. They were ready for it. And they had these tambourines at their bedside. And they would be ready that as soon as God redeemed them, they would be ready to celebrate. The question we should all be asking is that all that they were doing with their feminine faith, waiting with their tambourines? Meaning, were they like, we are victims of Egypt, or God wants us to be here, but we are suffering, we're in pain. There's nothing we can do about it. So we're waiting to be rescued. And when we're rescued by our big hero, then we're going to celebrate. That seems pretty passive. It's like God is going to be the one who rescues us. All we can do is wait. Is that what the tambourines were about? And the Midrashim, one of which we've touched in the daily, but I brought it today because it's really important to do all together this morning. The Midrashim tell us, the Talmud tells us otherwise. No, they were not passive victims waiting to be redeemed. Meaning, for us as women in 2024 to have these tambourines is so important, because we can't be empty-handed when Mashiach comes. We can't be empty-handed when Geula comes. We got to be ready to celebrate. But that's just one of the things we're preparing. That's just one of the things that faith means, like being ready to celebrate. There's more. What were the women of Israel doing during these years under the Egyptians? And so I'm going to share my screen so that we could look at this Talmud together. And it's almost like, I think maybe every woman should read this once a week or something. Such an important thing for us to bring our attention to. It's taught, Rabbi Avira taught, in the merit of the righteous women that were in that generation, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. So this first sentence is quoted often. The Rebbe talks about it a lot. Women talk a lot about it to encourage each other. It's in the merit of the women that redemption happens. So up until now, we're like, okay, we know they waited, but what else were they doing? What was in their merit? In the merit of the righteous women, they were redeemed from Egypt. He tells us of their righteous actions. At the time when the women would go to the river. Okay, pause. I want to actually give you a tiny 1 second introduction, 1 second background to this, historical background to this. When the Jewish people were being enslaved by Egypt, the men and the women were both being oppressed. In fact, one of the things that tells us is that the women were being oppressed by being given men's jobs, and the men were being oppressed by being given women's jobs. So if anyone's drawing parallels to today's exile, where it seems like we all have to take each other's jobs, it definitely is one kind of torture. But what happened is that the women were being oppressed and beaten and, carrying bricks and all day as well. Like, they also had this slavery and the men had the slavery. But one of the additional terrible features of Egyptian slavery is that the men, they were not given time to go home. So they were working in these fields all day with their making these bricks and building the pyramids. They had a quota that they had to fill every day, which meant that they had to rise like before the sun, and they weren't done until after the sun went down at night. And they had to fulfill their quota or else they'd be killed, beaten, killed. And they were so exhausted at the end of every workday that they would just collapse in the fields around Pisom and Ramses. They wouldn't be able to go back to their villages in Goshen or anywhere in their surrounding villages, the Jewish huts and hovels that they had. They couldn't go home because it was just, they were worked to the bone. So now this Medrash is going to explain to us what the women did about that. The time when these women would go to the rivers to draw water at the end of every day, the Holy One, blessed be He, would materialize for them small fish that would enter into their pitchers. And they would therefore draw pitchers that were half filled with water and half filled with fish. They would then come and place 2 pots on the fire, one a pot of hot water for washing their husbands, and one a pot of fish with which to feed them. They would then take what they'd prepared to their husbands to the fields. They would bathe their husbands and anoint them with oil and feed them the fish and give them to drink and bond with them in intimacy between the sheepfolds, i.e., between the borders and fences of the fields. As it is stated, when you lie among the sheepfolds, the wings of the dove are covered with silver and her pinions with a shimmer of gold. This is in Tehillim, we read this. So this is interpreted to mean that as a reward of when you lie among the sheepfolds, the Jewish people merited to receive the plunder of Egypt, because the continuation of the verse is, as the wings of the dove are covered with silver and shimmering gold. So we understand that it was a direct reward of this intimacy and bonding and the women encouraging and building up their men that the Jewish people left with reward. When these women would become pregnant, they'd come back to their homes. And when the time came to give birth, they would go and give birth in the fields under the apple tree. As it is stated in the Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in travail with you. There she was in travail and brought you forth. And the Holy One, blessed be He, would send from the heavens above an angel who would clean and prepare the newborns just as a midwife prepares the newborn. As it is stated, and as for your birth, on the day you were born, your navel was not cut, nor were you washed with water for cleansing. You are not salted at all, nor swaddled at all. From Yecheskel. This indicates that there were no midwives to take care of the Jews born in Egypt. And then the angel would come and gather for them 2 round stones from the field, and the babies would nurse from that which would flow out of them. One of the stones would flow with oil, and one of the stones with honey. As it's stated, he would suckle with honey from a crag and oil from a flinty rock. And that's in Devarim. Now, once the Egyptians would notice them, realizing that they were Jewish babies, they would come to kill them. But a miracle would occur for them, and they would be absorbed by the earth. The Egyptians would bring oxen and would plow upon them. As it states, the plowers plowed upon my back. They made long furrows. After the Egyptians would leave, the babies would emerge and exit the ground like grass of the field. As it states, I caused you to increase even as the growth of the field. And once the babies would grow, they would come like many flocks of sheep to their homes. As it is stated in the continuation of the verse, and you did increase and grow up, and you came with excellent beauty. You may, by the way, you may recognize some of this from the Haggadah. We read this on Pesach, some of these prophecies. Do not read Ba'adei Adaim with excellent beauty, rather Be'edrei Adarim, meaning as many flocks. When the Holy One, blessed be he, revealed himself at the sea, these children recognized him first, as it is stated, this is my God and I will glorify him. This is my God, I remember him. They recognized him from the previous time that he'd revealed himself to them in their infancy, enabling them to say, this is my God. So keep this in mind as something that the women did. And we'll look at one more thing that the women did here. You may remember this from the daily. And this is a plug. If anyone doesn't join the daily study, it's so incredible. Like, I'm learning the Torah on a whole new level where it's like, I feel like really, you're really getting to understand it on a whole new level. So definitely anyone who doesn't join yet can do that. But what happens in this verse? Hashem speaks to Moshe and he tells them, please speak to the ears of the people and let them borrow each man from his friend and each woman from her friend silver vessels and gold vessels. Rashi says, wow, what is please? What do you mean please speak in the ears of the people? Please is an expression of request. So why is God pleading with us to do this? He's all powerful. He could do whatever he wants. Why is he telling us, please, I request of you, be kind with me and go and take these vessels? He says, I'll ask you to warn them about this, i.e. to ask their neighbors for vessels, so that the righteous man Avram will not say, he, as in God, fulfilled the promise that they will enslave and oppress them, but he did not fulfill the promise. Afterwards, they will go forth with great possession. So what is God saying? What God is saying, and what the women already knew before God even spoke to them about this, is the liberation from exile is not a passive situation of being redeemed. It's a partnership. God and the Jewish people can partner to make the redemption happen together. The women of Israel and the men were familiar with the promise that God gave Avram at the treaty of the Bris Bein Habsarim, it's called, the treaty between the halves. When God took Avram and he told him to take these, and this is years ago, right, before Egypt, their forefather Avram, God had him take these animals and walk between them, and a big fire came down, and Avram fell asleep, and a big prophecy came to Avram where God told him, you're going to be oppressed, but you will leave with your kids and your children, your descendants, and they will leave with great wealth. And the women of Egypt were familiar with the rest of the prophecies that God gave Abraham. He said, your children will be a mighty nation. They will be tremendous. No one will be able to count them. So the women of Israel, the children of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they knew the prophecy. They knew the promise. What's the promise? You will be a tremendous nation and you will leave in great wealth. They're in Egypt being enslaved. What's their response to this? Oh, God will come and take us out one day? No. Their response was, great nation? I know how to make that happen. I'm going to partner with God to make a great nation. Leave with wealth? I know how to make that happen. God's telling me how to make it happen. This is the doorway. This is the opportunity. I'm going to go and make that happen. And so after a long day of work, backbreaking labor, these women were energized. They weren't depleted they were exhausted, bone weary, but they weren't burnt out. There's a difference between exhausted and drained. Your body could be completely done, and yet you have this energy from a different place, from your soul. from your excitement, from your enthusiasm, from your faith, good days are coming. I need to do my part to make them happen. Great nation, I'm going to make this happen. And they would go out to the fields and they would make this happen, whatever they can to make a great nation happen. And then ultimately to make great wealth happen. Active partnership. That's what faith is. People think faith is a passive thing. It's the opposite. When you have no faith, when we have no faith, when we're in despair, when we're burnt out, when we're exhausted, when we feel like forget it, when we feel like we want to give up, when we're hopeless, we become passive. The danger is we could become passive. When we have faith, that's when we have to become the most active. If this is happening and we're supposed to partner with God to make this happen, let's make it happen. So now, as women in 2024, what's in our hands? What do we need to do? What's our promise? Okay, great nation, wealth. But what's the promise of the days of Geulah? Right? Their promise was you'll leave Egypt and go to Israel. What's our promise? In addition to, yeah, you'll leave Egypt and go to Israel, there are all these incredible prophecies that we've received over the years about what this redemption will look like. There are prophecies in the time before the redemption, for example, social collapse, financial collapse. There's also something else where the children are going to be very chutzpahdik. And those are very interesting to understand in the way of there are different ways that we can make those happen. What does social collapse mean? Maybe the social collapse of all kinds of systems that have not been working. Those have to be disbanded for the truth to come out. The children being chutzpahdik is very funny because they're going to be pushing their parents to be even closer to God. Like, why aren't you giving me the real truth? Are you afraid that I'm going to rebel? Do more, mommy. Like, help us light Shabbat candles even earlier, or do more mitzvot in the house. So yes, there's also an excitement of before Mashiach comes, no hunger, restoration. Everyone will completely know Torah, internalize it. Good. Okay, Mashiach will teach everyone. Tragic events will turn into holidays. Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'll add a few more, right? The candies will grow on trees. Delicacies will be available as dust. The final 3 cities of refuge will be created, allowing us to do mitzvot. These are all prophecies of things that are going to happen in the time of Geulah. So if I may, I'd like to put that into 3 categories. And then if somebody feels like there was something that was left out, go ahead and tell me an additional category you want to add. One category, right? Putting it all into one category is everyone will have what they need. No one will lack anything. So that includes food and delicacies. That includes health and wellness, no disease, no injury, healing, right? So that's number 1. Everyone will have what they need. Number 2, Jews will have the freedom and the desire to do the 613 mitzvot, and non-Jews will have the freedom and desire and knowledge to do the 7 mitzvot that they have. So everyone will keep mitzvot. And the third category being that the knowledge of God will fill the earth like water covers the seas. Okay, why is it important to understand what this promise is? Again, because if we want to partner to make it happen, then we need to know what we're working to make happen. Why do we need to know what these things are? Because if we want to partner with God to make it happen, then we need to know what the promise is. What are we building? What are we making happen? And in that vein, what I think would be really encouraging thing to do is to take a look, and we do this maybe like twice a year at Bais Chana at least, to take a look at where are we up to? Where are we up to in these promises? We started at year 0. We are now in 5,784. Where are we up to in everyone having what they need? So I think all of us here probably know, and if you don't know, you'll be delighted to know, that when it comes to food being available as delicacies being available as dust, Is everyone familiar what governments are doing with food all over the world right now? Because there's so much of it and it's available like dust, and they're afraid that if we give it all to the people, then the economies will crumble. We in our grocery stores are all like, oh my goodness, chicken is costing more than it ever cost before. What's happening? But meanwhile, there are storehouses of food that just get burnt because, God forbid, if we allow all this food to reach the people, it will be available like dust, and then the economy will collapse. That's a very simplified way of explaining what the kind of governmental fear is. But what does that mean? That means as soon as the government or the powers that be have faith and understand that the world is going to be good and have a desire to serve God and have a desire for the world to be the way it needs to be, is the physical food actually available in the world like dust already? It's available like dust. We have technologies today that make food that has produced enough food for anyone to have any time. One of my favorite examples of this is how in Africa, the tremendous Sahara Desert, which for all of history has been unusable, the Israelis have brought all the irrigation systems there. And now there are these beautiful, beautiful oases, these fields, these gardens, mango trees, coconut trees, banana trees in the Sahara Desert, fields and fields of greenery, food being created, being produced out of dry sand, thanks to the technology that we are partnering with God to create. So available as dust, health and healing. What did the world look like in the year 0? What did it look like in the year 1000? What did it look like in the year 2000? What did it look like 100 years ago in terms of health and healing? Viral diseases were rampant. Childbirth, forget about it, was the most dangerous thing for a woman to engage in. Life expectancy was short. I don't have to explain this. We're all mature women here who know history. And if you don't, feel free to call me afterwards. This is one of my favorite topics. The how we're doing so much better than we think. And today, all the medical innovations, one of my favorite to think about is if 100 years ago, a soldier was in a war and they lost a limb, what were their recourses? What was available to them? Nothing. You cover it and you move on. There's nothing you can do. A few years ago, 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, what was available? They had prosthetics. It looks like an arm, but it doesn't really do anything an arm does. So you could look like you have all your limbs, but that's as close as we'll get, 40, 50, 60 years ago. I don't know the exact history. Please forgive me. A little bit more recently, what did they have available? Bionic prosthetics. That this arm or this leg, you put it on and it communicates with your brain and you can actually move it around and it can grab things. It can even write for you. The feet can actually move like feet move. And these bionics are getting more and more sophisticated. Now, what do they have available? And they've already been working on this for several years. In labs in Israel, what are they doing? They're actually taking a person's own stem cells, their own DNA, and creating in the labs bone, flesh, muscle, and actually regenerating the limb that they can then, a person's own body with their own genetic material can heal completely. This is just one tiny, tiny place where we're seeing this. We're not even talking about people being able to see again, people being able to hear again, all these technologies. We are partnering with God to make it happen that everyone has what they need on so many levels. So that's just a touch on that one category. What about this? Let's talk about the third category before the second, right? The third category. of the knowledge of God filling the earth like water covers the ocean. Is there any corner in the world today where a person cannot access knowledge of God? How many hits does Chabad.org get a day? Millions, millions of hits from people in all over the world. They get endless emails from people in South America, Africa, the Philippines, Hawaii, Siberia, everywhere, asking them for more information, more information. Can you send us a rabbi? Can you tell us how to do more good deeds? Everyone all over the world is accessing godliness, or rather can access godliness the minute they want to. What about people being able to do the mitzvot anywhere that they want? So last time we spoke about this, if you were here, you may remember that I said, 99% of the world, people are free. There's still some places where they're not free, like in the Middle East. So I was talking to some high school girls on Thursday, and one of them told me, she said, yeah, but a mitzvah is forever. And what you need to remember is that even in those places in the Middle East where today there aren't any Jews, like in Iraq and Iran and Syria and whatever, our ancestors have been there and they've done mitzvahs there, which means that the light of God, the eternal light of God that a Jew draws into the world when they do mitzvot, permeates, saturates the earth of all of these countries as well. Anyway, I was blown away. Thanks to our youth for expanding our understanding of how far we've gotten in this mission. If you walk around the world today, what's the likelihood that you'll ever step anywhere where a Jew has not been and has not done a mitzvah? The likelihood is quite low. What's the purpose of talking about this? We need to understand that this being a partnership, us working with God, faith being an active partnership, faith being not just, I'm waiting to be redeemed, God is making these terrible things happen, and I don't know whenever he comes, that's whenever whenever God decides to send Mashiach, that's when Mashiach will be here, that's when Geulah will start, that's when exile will end. It's the opposite. It is an active partnership. We need to recognize, what can I do? We need to recognize how far we've already come. And why is it important to recognize all these different things that will be when Mashiach comes? Because each of us here is different. Each of us here has a different talent. Each of us here has a different strength. So considering that we are so close, considering that so many of the prophecies, we've already partnered with God to make them happen, the question now each of us has to ask ourselves is, if I believe that we can make this shift happen immediately, what's my part? If I am living with active faith, what's my part in the partnership? What can I do next? Do I have the power to make a further innovation or to help somebody in having everything they need? Getting maybe a neighbor of mine, helping her have access to food or access to housing if she doesn't have access, helping her access the material needs she needs. Do I have a talent in technology or in medicine? Is that where I'll make my difference? Is that where I'll take my step? Is that where my partnership comes in? Even if it's in mental health, do I have strength in the political realm to help bring nations together? Is that where I'm involved in my partnership? What about the second realm, that everyone will do mitzvot? Is that where my strength is? Can I help one more person to be connected to God, to study a little bit more Torah, to know another mitzvah? Is that my part in the partnership? Is my part to bring more light into my Jewish home? By doing a mitzvah with a little bit more intention, by praying with more intention, by thinking about God when I do the mitzvah. Here's another crucial aspect to this. The slavery of Egypt, the exile of Egypt, was the me exile. How? When the Egyptians said, when Pharaoh said, I want you to drown all the baby boys, and I want you to make live all the baby girls. He was saying, I want you to throw all the baby girls into our culture. What's the Egyptian culture? Pharaoh said, I am God and I am the in charge of the Nile. I am God and I make the Nile run. That was the slavery of Egypt. It was self. It was me. I am God. And then, of course, they had all the idols that made them comfortable. Oh, the Nile is God because it gives me what I want. And today, that enslavement, that narrowness, is the part inside of ourselves that says me, self, self. That's Egypt. That's enslavement. That's a narrowness. Mitzrayim, which is the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, means meitzar, which means limited, bound up, constrained. Where do we get bound up and constrained? When our whole lives are about me. And it's not about this tremendous partnership, about God, about the world, about the person in front of me. The opposite of exile is connection. So today, we don't even have to spell out the way our Egypt has come back roaring with the exact same vengeance, the me exile, the self exile. So we have to ask ourselves, even when we do a mitzvah, is it about me because I want to feel fulfilled, because I want to feel Jewish? Or is it about the connection with God? God is keeping Shabbat right now, and therefore, God, I am with you. I want to keep Shabbat with you. Kindness, is it about me? I feel better when I give my neighbor some help? Or is it about a connection with my neighbor, really feeling what she's going through, wanting her life to be better, not expecting anything in return, not expecting myself to feel fulfilled? My child, when I am guiding them or being with them or loving them, is it because I'm going to get reward for it? I'll feel better as a parent. My child looks the way that, it will reflect well on me. Or is it because I'm thinking, what does my child need at this point? Each of these examples, in every interaction that we have, we can ask ourselves, am I enslaved in Egypt, or am I actively partnering to break the annihilation of Egypt, to be focused on the other, to make connections, to connect, to make unity happen? And then, of course, there's a third realm, right? We said one of the ways I could partner is making people's lives better. One of the ways I can partner is with sharing the knowledge of God. And what about the third realm of everyone will be able to do mitzvot? I guess it kind of merged a little bit there, but is this my talent? Am I able to do another mitzvah? Am I able to help somebody else do another mitzvah? And that's where we come back to the Parsha of Mishpatim, the laws. Even when the law is about injury, even when the law is about theft, even when the law is about murder, am I doing what makes sense to me? Am I stuck in Egypt still? Or am I connecting with God? Am I like, God, what's your perspective on this? And I'm going to do this because every time I do a mitzvah, as base as the mitzvah seems, I am breaking the bounds of exile. I'm being an active participant in making the Geula happen. Regarding the comments in the chat about all the deceased reuniting with us and being resurrected, it is such a fundamental part of understanding Geula, because this is an active partnership, And therefore, the world that we are actively bringing together will be shared by every single human being in history who has partnered to make this happen. It's not that life here on earth is temporary, and then the heaven, when we pass away, that's the permanent state of being. It's the opposite. God desired a home here in this world, which is why he created this world. He desired a real partnership. He desired that we live here. The reason people pass away today is because the soul gets tired, gets burnt out of being disconnected from God in being, meaning when we're in this world, unfortunately, sometimes our bodies are not yet perfectly connected with God, and our bodies really wear down our souls with all of the physical care that we need that we don't associate with God. So just to make this really, really clear, a Jew can spend 24 hours a day connected with God. I can eat in order to fulfill the mitzvah of taking care of this body. I can take exercise, walk, sleep, because this is literally the laws of the Torah, the laws in the Rambam. So we can spend every moment connected to God, but the problem is that it's hard. And so we don't always. So what happens is that every now and then a soul takes a break and is like, I'm done with the world for right now. I can't anymore. I'm going to spend some time without the body, kind of cleansing whatever happened in this world, cleansing away a little bit of the maybe bad things that I've done in the world, letting those fall away. But ultimately, real life is that we are going to be connected, all of us here in this world, bodies and souls, doing mitzvahs and studying Torah, connecting with each other, connecting with our families, connecting with our communities, connecting with God, all as one world, all serving Hashem together. So right after we receive the Torah, what do we talk about? Civil law, populating the physical world, actively partnering with God to make this world holy. And where we stand in history right now, all of us, Jewish women, in 5,784, let's remember how far we've come, because the greatest tool of the Yetzer Hara, the greatest tool of the forces of evil, is to make us despair, to make us think everything's bad, to do all the fear-mongering, to send all the news our way of bad things that are happening. We need to counterbalance that in a powerful way. We need to remember how far we've come. Look at how many of the prophecies are already tangible. We're so close. The world is filled with the knowledge of God, like waters cover the seas. It's so close for everyone to have everything that they need. It is so close for everyone to do mitzvot. We have come so far. Let's look at what it took. Who's being successful? How do I join the team that makes more of this happen? Let's join the team and let's each of us make it happen on a personal level, in a family level, on a communal level, on a nation level, whatever your talent is. Choose which part of the partnership you want to be part of and go for it. Take one more step in the right direction. The Rambam says every one of us has to view the world as a scale balanced perfectly between good and evil. And perhaps my good deed will be the one that tips the balance, and that's it. We're there. We've achieved it. It's time to experience Geula.